good day to brew, baby? What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, my hometown commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I take my first pass at the commander in front of us on a budget, on my quest to brew the magic world. You know, the motto, baby, it's ABB, always be brewing. That's what we're back to do today. That deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. As always, I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe. Consider checking out those links in the description for you below. I'd really appreciate it. But today, we're finishing up our last kind of full week of Spider-Man content, and today we're talking about Silk Web Weaver, a 4-mana Selesnya Spider Human Hero Legend 3/5 with web slinging, so we can cast this for a green and a white by returning a tap creature we control to its owner's hand, which is a nice ability to get it down for a little bit cheaper. But the main abilities we really care about are whenever we cast a creature spell, we can put a 1/1 human citizen creature token onto the battlefield. And for 5 mana, we get to buff all of our creatures and give them vigilance. And these are the two abilities we really care about. We're going to make tokens, and we can care about the fact that those tokens are both humans and tokens, which are both things we're going to try to take advantage of in our deck. And then, mid to late game, we're going to look at ways to not only buff the team, but even use Silk's ability, right, to just buff our board and make them a threat to our opponents. I want to say a quick thank you to the channel members. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in seeing all of our videos just a little bit early for just $1 a month, consider checking that out down below. I think there's a lot of human synergy you could choose to do here. I tried to go a little bit more token-centric, but there's a lot of great human support in green-white. I mean, probably one of our best examples of that as Commander is Kyler, Sigarden Emissary. Whenever another human comes in, you put a counter on Kyler, and all humans you control get a buff for each counter on Kyler. Kyler is, in my opinion, one of the better human commanders in its own right, but mainly using it here for support, right, as each one of these citizens coming in is going to, buff it. Catilda is going to let all of them tap for a mana of any of their colors, which is pretty cool, and then Catilda can tap to put a counter and everything, and then Horror Gondor is another great way to get a bunch of human tokens, because you can pay 3 and tap X, pay 3 and make X 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens where X is the number of humans grow, which we're going to have a lot, not only because of the citizens, but because of all the the creatures in our deck. But I think the key way we're going to try to do this is to care about tokens. There are so many great ways to care, make, and buff tokens, and I think that's kind of where most of our strategy is going to lie. Things like Elspeth Stormlayer doubles the amount of tokens we would make. She doesn't make humans, unfortunately, but her 0 to put a counter on each creature we control, give them flying till their next turn, is some pretty great value. And if you want to just make a couple soldiers, same thing with Sun's Champion. +1 just makes 3 1/1 soldiers, but if you can get her up to her ultimate, giving all of our creatures +2/+2 flying is a huge deal. Adeline, whenever you attack, makes a 1/1 human attacking each player or a planeswalker they control, and then she grows for each creature we control. Again, a great ability, and those are humans, right, for the purpose of any of our other abilities. Best says whenever one of our creatures with base power toughness 1/1 come in under our control, she gets a counter, and then whenever she attacks each other creature we control with a base power and toughness 1/1 gets a buff for the number of counters on best. Remember that all of those creatures that we're going to make, and pretty much every token in this deck we're making is a 1/1, so best is going to work really well for that. Exalted Sunborn, of course, the new token doubler out of Edge of Eternities, gives the nice option to warp in for just 2 mana if we need to, which is nice on a turn where maybe we're going to get ready to make a ton of tokens. We can kind of plan on doing it for just 2 mana. Otherwise, a big 5 mana, 4 or 5 that can double tokens. Galton Maverin has 2 options. You can make a big XX dinosaur token where X is the greatest power among other attacking creatures, or you can make X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink where X is the number of other attacking creatures whenever it attacks. So this is nice if you're going to swing with a bunch of 1/1s. You basically get 1/1s to replace them, which is a really cool idea because then you can just keep attacking with your waves of 1/1s that we're hopefully buffing. King Darien buffs all of our creatures, can be sacked to get all of our tokens hexproof and indestructible on a turn. Nesting Dovehawks lets us populate at the start of each of our combats, making a token that's a copy of a creature token we control, and then whenever another token comes in, we get to grow Nesting Dovehawk into a nice threat. Queen Eleanor is going to grow for each creature we control, but then whenever we make 1 or more creature tokens, we make an extra 1/1 white soldier instead, just getting us more bodies on the board. Warren Warrior Leader, whenever you attack, can either make a rabbit that's after attacking or just buff your entire board of attacking creatures. This is really nice because if we offspring the Warren Warrior Leader in, you have a potentiality to get +2/+2 each turn attacking, which is not nothing and can definitely make a difference, right, the wider you're going. I think all of these abilities are easy to discount, But you have to remember that when you have a board of 15 or 20 tokens, there's a difference between +1/+1 and +2/+2, right? And that's where some of these Selesnya Go Wide tokens decks really try to take advantage. Is the wider you go, the better these effects are. For the common good, makes X copies of target token we control, and then all of our tokens gain indestructible till our next turn, and we gain a life for each of them. This is really nice because we can make a bunch of them and then try to hedge ourselves away from some removal, right? People can't then board wipe us and things like that, protecting our tokens for another big attack. March of the Multitude lets us make a bunch of soldiers with lifelink, and then it does have Convoke, so we can tap our creatures to help pay to make X even bigger. Scepter Celebration makes some citizens whenever the creature hits a player, makes them equal to the amount of damage and does give out trample. Dawnmaker Shop makes a toy whenever one or more non-toy creatures we control attack a player, which is a really nice ability. And then Porcelain Gallery adds a nice way for us to really take advantage of the number of creatures on board, turning all of our creatures into X. X is where X is the number of creatures we control, which is a huge ability. In all the times I've ever played Porcelain Gallery tends to very quickly force the game to either molt around it or end, because if you're sitting there with 10 1/1s, those are now 10/10s, right? And they're very difficult to deal with. And since this is a special action, it can't be, since this is an ability that you're activating, not a spell. Like, so if dollar micro shops aren't in the battlefield and you pay 6 for the gallery, you're not casting a spell, so somebody can't counter it. And it's just very difficult to deal with a board of that many big creatures. But one of our other great alternate win cons is Halo Fountain. So we can pay 1 white and tap it to untap a tap creature we control to make a 1/1 citizen. We can pay 2 into it to tap it, to untap 2 tap creatures we control to draw a card. We can pay 5 white and untap 15 tap creatures we control to win the game. So, if we can find the fountain, we're going to be trying to attack with our tokens and then untap them for value and maybe potentially to win the game. Parallel Lives, right? Going to double up the amount of tokens we would create. Rabble Rousing does have hideaways. When it comes in, you look at the top 5, put one of them face down in exile, and then when you attack with one more creatures, you make that many citizens. And then if you have 10 or more creatures, you can play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. But Rabble Rousing is going to really be an advantage for us because it's making citizens. The citizens aren't humans, but citizen is still a type we can care about and is going to matter for some of these buff type cards we have. But again, Rebel Rousing is just going to make us more tokens, right? Every combat as we're attacking, and allow us to, attack with as many tokens as possible and leave the rest of them, right, blocking so we can keep alive. Renewed Solidarity going to buff all of our citizens, and then for each token you control the chosen type that enter this turn, you get to create a token that's copied at the beginning of our end step. This is a huge deal, just making us more and more citizens, and why cards like Rabble Rousing are so important with Renewed Solidarity, because you could just make an absolute ton of them. But again, I think what makes Selesnya tokens deck so good is not their ability to create tokens, which is a great thing in its own right, but it's ending the game. And there's a lot of ways you can look at doing this. Remember that Silk has that ability, but it's not always the most efficient, right? I love something like Eldrazi Monument, just giving them all +1/+1 flying and indestructible. You got to sack a token on each of your upkeeps to keep it around, but I mean, putting them all the errors are going to give you a benefit. You have spells or abilities like Overwhelming Stampede to give all of our creatures +X/+X and Trample until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures we control. Just become very brutal. Trample's a great ability to add to your creatures because then your opponent can't just, easily chump block them. And the bigger they are, right, the harder it is for your opponent to block them. I love the idea of something like For the Emperor, 4 mana to give them all a buff, Vigilance, and Lifelink. You're going to attain a ton of life. They have Vigilance, they're back to block. And then even if somebody chump blocks, you're, even at 3/3s, you're still gaining the life, right? You're still getting so much benefit from it. Cathar's Crusade is such a well-played card in decks like this. Whenever a creature comes in, you put a counter on each creature you control. So whenever a creature we control comes in, put a counter on all of our creatures. Get to get out of hand very quickly. Flying with the White Tree just buffs all of our creatures. Non-legends get +1/+1. Legends get +2/+1 and ward 1 instead, but still very useful. Inspiring Leader just buffing all of our tokens as long as we control our commander. Intangible Virtue gives them all a little bit buff and Vigilance. Mari's Wake is going to buff all of our creatures, but allow us to tap for extra mana. And then Virtual Loyalty on our end step is going to give all of our creatures a counter and untap them. So you can see there's lots of ways we could take advantage of buffing the team, whether it be Vigilance, buffs, counters. There's so many ways we could do that to make our board a real threat. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my first shot at Silk, even on a budget. And I think going into testing, if you want to up your budget, and make the deck more reliable. I think there's really one easy way to do it, and that's to find more doublers. You have things like Mondrak that double the amount of tokens you can make. You have O'Hare Talk from Los Ixalan that triples the number of tokens you'd make. There's a lot of other ways to take advantage of that, and those are very useful, right? More tokens every time you make them means less times you need to make tokens before you become a threat. Caretaker's Talent, some nice draw, and also can lead up into a buff. And then something like a Vendo, tapping for mana for each creature you control is a huge deal if you can get it stationed up. Vendo and Mondrak just basically didn't make it in due to the budget. I always try to keep a decent budget here on the show, and I still think the deck already has multiple doublers. You have Elspeth, you have Exalted Sunborn, you know, you have Parallel Lives. It's not like you don't have any doublers at all, but there are more of them as you can add. Doubling Season, Mondrak, O'Hare Talk, right? You can also look into a couple others as well, but it just comes down to what do you want to see happen. I think the other thing to think about in testing is, do you want to spin more towards humans? Do you want to care more about humans? Because I think Silk does give you the benefit of every time you're casting a regular creature, you're getting a token. So you could even pull back on some of the token matters type stuff and push more into the humans type stuff. And there's so much support for that. And I think you'll find a great deck therein. But let's do what we love to do on the channel the most and get into our playtests. Remember, the goal of playtests on our channel is not to find magical Christmas land. It's not to shovel our best plays. It's getting some gameplay scenarios and kind of understand what are we looking for and what hands are going to be keepable for us. I like this. I've got a 3-lander with Dollmaker's Shop. We see Sunborn, we see Monument, we see Galt on the top end. It's going to take a little bit with this hand to get up to a really good value, but the important part is that we're going to find it. And we have, some of it already in our hand. Here, nothing really quite I can do on turn 3. Remember with, I'm going to play then crack the Sunborn here, or the Fatal Passage. Remember with Sunborn coming in for 2, it doesn't have haste. I think there's a split of what you can do this turn. We could either dump in Silk for first or Jackrabbit. I think Silk makes more sense because then when we play Jackrabbit, we get the trigger from it. My thought on Jackrabbit is put it in for 3 into the X. This puts it in with 3 counters. And now when it attacks, it's going to make a bunch of rabbits. We attack with Silk this turn. Sorry, we get a Citizen. And then we attack with Silk and get a toy. So right now we're really starting to, get some resources in. 5 mana again this turn. I love something like Elven Chorus. Elven Chorus is going to allow our creatures to tap for mana. I also love the idea of something like Eldrazi Monument. Remember, this gives all of our creatures +1/+1 flying and indestructible, not just tokens. So this is going to protect our board. And because we're making the toys, we'll happily give the toys up to keep, Monument online. You go to combat, both of these are going to attack. So you're making 2 more toys. And then Jackrabbit's going to make you 5 rabbits, right? Because you're going to have 4 from Jackrabbit normally plus the buff from the Monument. So now we've got a ton of tokens. They all have indestructible. So now our opponent has to use exile removal, right? And now coming to this turn, 7 mana, we can either turn on the Porcelain Gallery, which is probably just lethal, right, with all of them having flying, or you could look at something like for the Emperor. But honestly, I'd probably just turn on Porcelain Gallery. Now these are all getting massive. You're going to get more of them because of Jackrabbit attacking now that it has that beautiful buff. And then all these are in the air and just going to knock over our opponents. Again, I hope you could see here that this is why we're kind of trying to lean into the Selesnya tokens thing. But again, I could see why you'd want to lean into the humans more. And I think all that support's there. It's just not the route, I chose take. 3-lander here with Catilda early. Patrick Banner, I'm going to pretty much always choose Citizen since the Citizen tokens are the easiest thing for us to make. But you could also choose Human if you want to, since all the Citizens are also humans. It just comes down to what your preference is. Not much we can do here in turn 1. Turn 2, I think it just makes sense to get Catilda down right. Turn 3, I can get Silk down, because remember, Catilda can tap for 1. So I think I'm going to get Silk down. Main reason there is so that as we cast more things, right? If I go Patrick Banner, I can only get Jackrabbit in for 1. Otherwise, I could get Jackrabbit in for 4. Just trying to think of what makes the most sense. 4 gets me the most value, I think, overall, because then I'm getting more rabbits each turn, and we get to make that Citizen token. Come into this turn. Now the monument's probably really worth it, right? Because then now everything is indestructible. This jackrabbit attacking is making 6 rabbits, right? 4 counters on it makes it 5. And then the nice thing is then we don't even have to tap. These guys may not even to attack. You could use them to get the Patchwork banner down if you wanted to call rabbit, since the rabbit's the clear setup with the jackrabbit. You could even still kill human, if you really want to start buffing up these guys. But I think otherwise, I think if you're not going to attack with them, use them to play the banner. You could always keep with the Druid's Deliverance as well. So note that this mana doesn't have to be used to use anything. So Druid Deliverance could be good, prevent a crackback. But otherwise, I think Jackrabbit's just going to get out of hand, right? You have to sack a token, do it, right? Keep it alive. I don't even mind flowering here. You could also just go for the common good, make a couple copies of the humans just to keep them safe. Make 2 copies of them, give them all indestructible, and just keep ramming in. Flowering, I think, is a better for the attacks, right? Turn these into 3/3s. And you could hold up Deliverance. You could even still common for 1. You could hold up the removal, right? There's so many options now. And I think, again, you see the benefit of some of these great token producers and how they can help us, take advantage of our right shot to go wide. Here we see a 3-lander, but we see a card that I think is going to see a lot of great play for us in Horn of Gondor, right? Making those human tokens. You see a Parallel Lives. We see Elven Chorus for our stuff to tap. I really like the look of a start like this. Nature's Lore are going to go get one of the couple dual lands we have in the deck just to make sure we have access to more of our colors. Turn 4, there is the option to Silk, but I think I kind of like Parallel Lives here. It feels odd, but I think my thought there is because then I can Horn of Gondor. And that's going to make 2 1/1 humans. And then I think I would just follow up with the World Tree. The White Tree, sorry, just to protect, get them a little bit bigger. And then coming into this turn, I could Silk, which would set up more tokens to come in, but I really don't have much to play. If I go Horn of Gondor, I'm making 4. If I put 3 into it right now, I'm making 4, right, instead of 2. That leaves me 2 mana up. I could use it. Or let's see what. I could play the Chorus and then tap 3 into the Gondor for 4. Right, so then on future turns, they just turn into more mana, right? That's the nice thing about the Chorus. And then we can, cast creatures from the top. Maya's not a bad one, giving them all a flat buff and making us more. It's 3 mana for the Gondor to make what? Like 6 of them, so that'd make me 12 more. So I have 2 plus 6, that's 8 mana, right? Maya wouldn't be bad for it. I think it makes sense to just go with the Monument and then use some of them to make the Gondor, right? And now we're just absolutely loaded with soldiers. Right, they're protected to the natural board wipe. They'd have to have either a bounce or a mass X or a mass -X. Remember, they all have +2 right now. So they're 3/3s, which are going to make them a little bit harder to get rid of. And I think I think we're just in good shape. You could put Aranya down if you want to, but otherwise I think, you just load up the Virtual Load too. This is where it's an example of sometimes your deck just does what it does in its strategy without your commander, but hey, Silk is still going to help, especially on those hands where you see lots of creatures. But on playtest number 4 here, keeping a 3-lander with Soaring, we see Adeline, we see Nature's Rhythm, which can go get key creatures out of our deck, and then Horn of Gondor. I like this one. Go into the Soul Ring. Right, my thought is Ardent Veil into the Adeline. Right, set this up for a future turn. Turn 5, I think Silk could make sense. I also could see the argument for just dumping in Exalted Sunborn and getting 6 humans this turn, right? 2 attacking each person. They're probably going to get beat back a little bit on turn 3. I imagine a couple of them get picked off by blocks. But again, turn 3 is a great time to have that much value on the board. Now on turn 4, we have our doubler sitting there. So now the thought is what makes the most sense. We could Gondor and crack it this turn. So we would Gondor for a soldier. We would get 2 soldiers. We'd be at 7 humans, and then crack it for 14 1/1s. And that would be a nice potential way to do it. I'd also kind of think about doing something like Nature's Rhythm. This is where knowing what's in your deck is a huge deal. And the creature that I would be looking for is Champion of Lambhole. This is a creature that says whenever another creature comes in, you put a counter on it, and creatures that have power less than it can't block our creatures. Because now when Adeline attacks and you make these 6 humans, you've got 6 counters on, Chamberlain Hill. Now nothing with under 7 power can block our creatures. And now I think we're just going to continue to roll forward. Ideally, the next turn would be something that we would get with a buff, because remember, Silk is 4 to get down and 5 to use its ability. But I think you could just go Gondor. You could get the Halo Fountain, and we're really darn close. We just actually don't have the white mana, but we're actually getting a lot closer to that. We have the Hour Reckoning that we're 1 white pip off. I guess the Halo Fountain would make the most sense. On future turns, you could use it to draw, right? Try to dig into some more things. Something like what? It plus Silk. And then make a bunch of humans again. And then again, we're just away from, then we would just use our mana from Silk to buff all these 1/1s that can't be blocked. And I think we're just in good shape. I know that last one's a little Christmas landy. It comes down to our opponents not having any mass removal. But again, Selesnya tokens is a very interesting archetype. I don't think Silk's the best by any means. I think it's interesting. I think it probably becomes a really interesting humans commander by really paying more attention into the humans. Not something I chose to do, but again, I think could be very good. I just tried to, marry both worlds. But I'd love to know what you think of Silk, and I will catch you all in the next one.